All right. Thank you so much, Fee, for coming and joining me today. I'm so excited to have this interview. Fee O'Shea is a prolific writer. She has written many, many books and has an amazing story about becoming vegan and then, well, vegetarian first, wasn't it? And then moving over into becoming a vegan and then becoming a plant-based whole food vegan. And I think that's a really interesting story that I would love to start with, if you wouldn't mind, Fee.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for asking me. It's a privilege to be here with you. So, as you say, I started out as a vegetarian, and that was back in the late 90s. It's simply because my marriage had fallen over, and I really didn't have enough money. So it was just easier and cheaper for me to buy lentils as opposed to be buying meat. That's where it kind of started. I had friends who gave me backyard eggs, and occasionally there was the odd bit of fish thrown my way, and it was sort of pretty much like that. I did have a bonus though, and that was my son was vegan.
That's
now
right.
He'd been kind of like brought up vegan. Well, I didn't know it, because back in those days, vegans were pretty much, hippies and activists and anarchists and all that sort of thing was the label for a vegan. So, but he would come home and he started kind of telling me a little bit about, especially about the dairy industry here in New Zealand, which is big, and the factory farming and just the general animal welfare side of it. So then the internet came along, and I started to explore for myself and discovered that yes, the meat industry has got a lot to answer to as far as their treatment of animals, and of course then there was the animal testing and all sorts of things. So I can't put a date on when I turned vegan, and I didn't deliberately turn vegan.
Yeah.
It was like I woke up one day and thought, actually, I haven't had any dairy or eggs for a long time. Oh gosh, I'm vegan. It was kind of like one of those things. So I started a process. I started writing, sort of like in the first decade of this century, and that kind of like opened my eyes, because in that writing, of course, I was researching an awful lot, and so I saw the worldwide side of it as well. And then when I was, I think I was around about 60 years of age. I really can't remember, to be perfectly honest, but I had a girlfriend who had a heart attack. And that was a real wake-up call for me. Insofar as, she was rushed into hospital. She had 3 stents put in. Now, interestingly enough, I had lived with her for a wee while prior to this, and I'd done all the cooking, which of course was vegan food. And you've also got to remember too that starting out in the late 90s and early 2000s, there weren't the products. So it was pretty much whole food then. Now, sure, I was still having oil. Coconut oil was getting to be quite big, so I was making cheeses, vegan cheeses and that sort of thing. So, but the rest of my foods was pretty whole. So, I was cooking for her. Then she met a guy, and she went off and got married, and it was lovely. But then she has this heart attack, and I looked at what the dietitians gave her when she left hospital as to what she should be eating, and I was astounded, because by then I'm also reading books by Dr. Esseltine and Caldwell and following Dr. Greger and all of these plant-based doctors, and I was absolutely astounded at just it was so sure, they sort of said lots of vegetables and fruits, but it was, to have, lean chicken. And it's like, don't they know there's more fat inside the chicken than there is on the skin. When I see someone take the skin off a chicken, I want to burst out laughing because, why are you doing it? There's more in the chicken than what there is outside of it. So it puzzled me, and I thought, plus it was that age group that I was coming into where, and all my siblings, I'm the youngest, and all my siblings are on high blood pressure, cholesterol tablets, those sorts of things. I mean, they're all in their 70s, and they're all healthy, so to speak, but they're on medication. And I really didn't want to go down that track. So, and plus I live alone, so it's like, well, maybe if I fell over and had a stroke or something and couldn't get to a phone, how long would I lie there before somebody found me? So all of these things went through my head. So I decided, right, that's it. I'm going to get stuck into the whole food plant-based and really kind of make a go of it. So
can I cut in there? Because you also went to the doctors and had your cholesterol was a little bit high. And it was so interesting that the doctor said to you, oh, well, you're, what do you say? You're vegan or you're vegetarian? There's nothing we can do about it?
No, he didn't know. At that point, I was a vegan. He was looking at my the calcium intake, and he said to me, because a vegan should go and have their bloods done at least once every 2 years.
Yeah.
But at my age now, I'm going once a year. So I'd gone along. He was a new doctor, and I'd gone along, and he said, well, he was at least up front, and he said, I really don't know a lot about vegans. And he said, sort of like, where do you get your calcium? And I basically just looked at him and said, food. And it's like, I couldn't I had to be fairly careful because I hadn't had the blood work done. So I had no idea what my calcium level was. So he said to me, well, here's a list of the calcium foods you should have. And it was dairy, ooh, nuts, dairy, broccoli, dairy. It was, it was very dairy heavy. So I had the bloods done, and when they came back, of course, the calcium level was exceptional. It was high. Protein was off the chart. I mean, he actually made the comment, you've got more protein than a meat eater. And I went, yes, of course I do. So it was, but I did put it down because at that point I was predominantly whole food, plant-based.
Yeah.
Now, I have since been able to change to a doctor who is a plant-based doctor, and it's wonderful. Now, coming forward to last December, I went to have the blood work done as normal. And she took my blood pressure and she said, oh gosh, she said, that's rather high. And I said, well, it always seems to be high when I go and get it checked. And she said, So she looked back through and she could see, yes, it's normally high. And I said, and she said, she found it sort of odd, mainly because of, she knows how I eat, right? Now, I'm not pedantic about whole food plant-based. If I go out somewhere and they've cooked in oil, sweet, I don't have a problem. But then I haven't had the illness, okay? So I haven't had the cancer, and I haven't got diabetes. I haven't had any of those things, right? Or the heart disease. So I am 95% of the time, I am whole food plant-based. And she knows that, but she still sort of said, well, I'm surprised. So she said to me, well, you can try doing beetroot, having, the other one was hibiscus tea. So I came home and I looked at what I was doing, and I went and hired a blood pressure thingamabobs, right? And I got home and I started, and I had it for 2 weeks. So I kept a food diary. I went and bought beet powder, and I was having a beet smoothie in the morning, a tablespoon of the beet powder, or pretty much near to a tablespoon every morning. And I was drinking the hibiscus tea, and then my daughter actually sent me some tablets, hibiscus tablets from the States, much cheaper than what we pay for them here.
Yeah.
And it's a really high amount. I would never be able to drink that much.
Yeah.
So that was cool. So I was doing that. And I'm taking the blood pressure all through, about 3 times a day at different times, etc. And what happened was it was sort of going like this. So it was going up and down, but it was coming down. And the last 2 days, I think the highest was 121 over about 81, I think. And then the lowest, and then, but other than that, it was under the 120, and it was down under the 80. So it was like, oh, this is really cool, right? I've nailed it. So I go back to the doctor with my little food chart and everything, and I mean the food really wasn't that different. Apart from the beet smoothie, I really wasn't doing that much different, okay? So I go back to the doctor, and she goes through, she says, oh, this is wonderful, and everything else. She takes my blood pressure again, and it was 190 over, I think about, I can't remember, 89 or something. And I said, and she goes, oh, and she said, oh, I'll take it again. So she took it again, and it was 189 over, and I said, so what, I'm dead? She said, no. She said, you've got white coat syndrome. And meaning every time I sit in a doctor's office and they take my blood pressure, it's going to be high. I can't help it. Yeah. And I had sat in the waiting room doing deep breathing and meditating and that sort of stuff. Made no difference. So once she saw the 2 weeks, she could see that I actually have normal blood pressure.
Yeah.
But I find it very interesting that that my siblings are all on high blood pressure. My father had high blood pressure. I don't know about my mother. I don't think so. She died sort of like, she was a bit younger when she died, but so I don't know about her. But yeah, it's kind of it's supposedly hereditary.
Yeah. Which is there is that genetic factor, which I think, 50 years ago, we thought everything was down to genetics. And I think this is a transition that we're making at the moment, understanding that actually genetics plays a very small part. And even if you do have a genetic predisposition like you do, you can absolutely still take control with your diet and your lifestyle.
Absolutely. The hereditary part is, as you say, there is a little bit that is genetically, but the hereditary part is how you eat. You eat the same way as your parents ate.
That's right.
That's right. How you grew up. I grew up. That's how I grew up. Yep. Meat and I was fortunate that my mum we had a lot of vegetables, but we still had a lot of meat, and we had a lot of dairy.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right. Yeah, so, I think that whole. I want to talk about dairy. I want to talk about calcium, and you've obviously would have read the China study, and I think that for anyone listening is an absolute must, because he grew up on a dairy farm, and he set out to prove that the more calcium, the more dairy you ate, the more meat you ate, the healthier you would be. And by the time he was 50, it was plant-based whole food. So, the myths with calcium, abound, that we need dairy for calcium. So I'd love your take on that. What is your research showing you?
To start with, to begin with, my before I even really started to research it, it seemed where I came from was the osteoporosis thing, and I was fascinated how cultures around the world that don't have osteoporosis don't have dairy, and yet the countries that have osteoporosis have a lot of dairy. And the sad part about it is going upwards. It's on an upward trajectory. Now, China itself, I am just, it's like, it's criminal that our New Zealand dairy is sending over so much dairy, and they've got into it, and they have actually noticed that in the last 50 years, the health of their citizens is going like this, insofar for heart disease and for osteoporosis and those sorts of things, and cancers, and connected with dairy. And it's in fact, the Chinese government came out at one stage, I think it was midway through last year, and basically said to their people, you have to cut back on the meat. Now, meat over there is very much a what's the word I'm looking for? It's the middle class proving that they're wealthy. So it's a wealthy thing. It's the more meat you have, the wealthier.
Yes. What's that word? Ostentatious, but it's not. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know what I mean. And it's and I think China is a really, really good example of how the health of their people was really, and yet, you know, so many of their people were in poverty, but they still had good health. They had endurance, and they had energy, and they had all of these things. And what did they live on? Rice and a little bit of fish. They had a little bit of fish once every, you know, sort of maybe once every couple of weeks. They would have had meat maybe once a month. But predominantly they were plants. It's fascinating, and that kind of got me into it as far as the calcium goes, and it was just logical, absolutely logical. It's exactly the same when people come out and sort of say, oh, you can't eat soy, you know, men especially, they'll get breasts. It's like, oh, please. You know, the soy that is fed to animals is by far the worst soy ever, because genetically, and it's modified, and it's pesticide, and it's all that sort of stuff, and that's fed into the cow that you eat. So, I mean, hey, you know, they're getting far worse soy. But, you know, that's another thing, is that the Asian people have eaten soy for such a long time. And again, they have menopause. They don't really suffer menopause. They don't, you know, these, you know, period pains and things like that. They never really had that sort of thing.
No, I know. It's sometimes it can just be so frustrating when you know all this information and you want to get it out there, because absolutely you can control even your period pains, you know, reduce it to almost nothing. You know, menopause, I've just sailed through menopause, you know, because of what we're eating. But it's just absolutely so difficult, as we know, for, you know, people to make those changes, because it is hard. Like, I take my own food a lot of the time. I have no expectation that people cook the way that I want to eat. And if I don't want to be, you know, eating what they've made, I take it. So we'll take something to share. But it's just so fascinating. And I think for me, the protein one was probably the hardest to let go of. Coming from that science background, it was really hard to let go of the meat and thinking that we needed to be eating, you know, some kind of meat or fish, and I'm not legalistic. So if I go to someone's house and their husband has caught a fish, I'll have some fish with the family, or, you know, someone's got a lovely cow in the garden, you know, or lamb, and, you know, it's been killed humanely and all the rest of it. I'm more than happy to have some. But like you, 99% of the time, I don't even bother now. And that's been a really, it's been a real real journey, and especially since I'm going against, you know, my profession. You know, totally. So that's been really hard for me to come out of behind that as well, and stand up and say, actually, I don't follow that. I think that the healthiest way we can eat is plant-based whole food. And I think I always like to, maybe it's just still sitting on the fence or staying safe, but I love that word based, because based means the word based, meaning that, no, you don't have to be legalistic, because I'm coming at it from a health perspective. from a health
Yes.
perspective, there is that little bit of room to maybe have, you know, some fish once a month, or, you know, something like that. But I totally also understand, you know, the animal side of things, animal cruelty side of things. And I think for anyone listening, if you really want to understand what's going on in Australia, watch Dominion. Would that, you know, that
Totally.
that
Totally.
documentary was blew my socks off, because I kind of thought that that kind of stuff only happened in America.
That's
you know?
right.
But when you watch it and you go, this is Australian, this is happening in Australia, I think we all need to, you know, watch that, and don't have the children in the room.
We have this. We have a similar thing here in New Zealand. You know, people sort of say, oh, you know, farmers love their cows and you know, they're really good. And it's like, no, they don't. There is no way that there is absolutely no way that, whether it's just a backyard cow, or whether it's a cow in a herd, you know, a big herd, that for the farmer to love his cow, because he may love his dog or his cat, you know, he doesn't send them off to slaughter. You know, as soon as that cow is no longer, if it's dairy, no longer can produce the milk, then it's sent off to slaughter. It's a monetary item. It's a monetary unit. And until such people understand that, and they, you know, sure, they look after them, sure, they bring the vet in, because that cow is worth money to them. You know, and that is one thing that really bugs me. I do get a lot of people who sort of say, oh, but, you know, like you in Australia, you think that we're not in the States, or
we don't have those disgusting feedlots.
No. And I have to say to people, we've actually had feedlots since the mid-90s. So don't give me that rubbish, you know. It's like, yes, they're predominantly grass. And this is the silly part about, you know, the consumer can be sucked in. Grass-fed can mean that they're out on a paddock and grass-fed. Then the last 3 months, they go into a feedlot where they're also fed all the antibiotics. But because the food, which is like a pellety stuff, is basically grass, the whole animal then can be called grass-fed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like
from a health perspective, from a, you know, trying to avoid cancer perspective, you know, really there isn't a lot of safety around eating animal products. You know, from all of the, you know, the added antibiotics and growth hormones, and even just the, you know, environmental pollutants that the animals are eating from just the grass. You know, the dioxins are the greatest in, you know, in our animal foods. So just want to ask you, changing tack, about iron. Is that one of the things that you recommend, like when you say, you know, vegans need to have their blood checked? So you're looking at, I would imagine B12 would be one of them, protein, calcium, and iron.
I mean, that is one side of it, is to look at the iron. That's one of the things that they look at. They look at the B12. The B12 is the biggest thing. There's only 2 supplements that I recommend that people have, and one is the B12, and you can have it as a B complex if you want. I just take the little B12. And nowadays there are so many foods that are fortified with B12, which is really good. But the other thing is vitamin D. And vitamin D, which as a vegan, there is a vegan version of it. But D is another one. And even though, like you and I both, we live in a sunny country, but in actual fact, we still actually are lacking vitamin D. And you have to have those things like vitamin C, etc., to absorb the calcium and all of the other nutrients. You have to have those things. So vitamin C is easy to get if you're a plant-based person. But the D and the B12 are the 2 that we have. If you grow your own vegetables, then probably B12 you'll be okay with, because we make it ourselves. It's a myth that it comes from the cow or from animals. It comes from the plant, and the cow makes it and then passes it on to you, but you can make it yourself. But what we have done, and why it's lacking, and animals who go to feedlots, and animals, a lot of animals, even out there on the out there in the grass paddocks, a lot of them still need to have a D supplement, and the reason, a B12 supplement, and the reason being, like all zoo animals have to have B12 supplements. The reason being is that we have sanitized our world so much that we have got rid of the bacteria, and we are bringing these animals up on sanitized feed, and that's where the problem is heading. So, but getting back to the iron, I don't even think about it. And it always makes me laugh, and you probably get it too, well, especially because you are of your background. But for me, I always get sort of people saying, oh, but you won't get enough protein, or you don't get enough iron, or you don't. And it's like, who made you a dietitian, or a doctor right there and then, It's like, well, I'm not dead yet, and I've been doing it a long time.
But I think the funniest thing about that, though, is that the people who immediately say, but what about your protein, what about your iron, usually don't have a very healthy diet themselves.
No,
and
they don't.
So, I mean, I just use it as an opportunity to sort of just educate and say, well, actually, there's heaps of, protein in things like, legumes. And, that's a huge myth in itself, because when I went to university, we thought that the only complete, animal products are a complete protein, but we thought that if you weren't going to be eating animals, then you had to eat these combinations of like rice and beans and all that sort of thing. But actually, it's a myth. The lady who wrote the book that it came out in later wrote a second book and said, oh, actually, I made a mistake.
I got it wrong.
But by then,
I know. It's too late.
Now, what upsets me is that that is in university level information. That's what we're being taught. And I'm going, you based your information that teaching us on a book that was later, that's distressing, because it's so confusing for people out there. And I think, you and I, both say that it's not easy, and yes, it's confusing, but let's just strip it back and look at the foods, even if you still want to eat a meat. Strip away all the processed stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Come back to eating real food, and because that's where all the nutrients are, and all the damage that is happening to us is coming from all of the sugar and the processed foods and the nasty oils and all the rest of it. And I think, I think your story about your partner and him having I don't know whether he had a heart attack. No,
it was a friend of mine. It was a friend, a woman, a friend.
It was the story about your partner who read Dr. Greger's How Not to Die and totally changed his diet and came off all of his medications. Now, how many times, just total respect for that man, because it's so hard at that age to change your diet and your lifestyle. But obviously, having had his moment, it gave him that impetus to get on and do it.
I think too, and you may find this as well, there is, because I don't have any letters after my name, or I haven't, sort of studied under the right people or done anything like that. I'm talking close friends and family think that I'm talking enough through a hole in my head. So it's whereas I can speak to a room full of people and who I don't know, and they can get it, and they ask me lots of questions, etc., about the lifestyle. But it's, I find it interesting, you know, people do ask, where do you get these things from, the calcium and iron, etc. Now, I liken it to when I was a meat eater, I never thought about it. It never crossed my mind that I should make sure that I'm getting calcium or protein or iron or whatever. If I felt a little bit tired, it was like, oh, I wonder if I'm lacking in a bit of iron. And, you know, it just didn't. The only times that I really thought nutrition was when I was pregnant and breastfeeding, and that was really the only time. The rest of it was just, I was just eating food. So to going plant-based or going vegan first, I did make sure that I was conscious that I was trying to have things like legumes and beans and those sorts of things, that I upped the leafy greens, and you know, if I felt a bit tired, I would go out to the garden and just get a big bunch of parsley and eat that. Think, well, there's some iron, that's good enough. But I never, I didn't really kind of like stress about the food I was eating.
Yeah.
It just didn't occur to me to stress about the food. And sort of the reading of especially Dr. Greger and his, you know, Daily Dozen, probably the only thing that I have introduced into my diet, which wasn't there before, is berries, because I was never really a berry fan. I didn't really like berries. So I think that's the only thing really that I've introduced. I thought, oh, okay, I suppose I better eat some berries, but the rest of it I was already eating, maybe not every day, but, you know, I was eating it. So it's the old saying, if it's a balanced diet, and you're eating certain foods each day, then you're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I wrote one of my books was called What to Eat Instead of Meat. Because that was a question, and all my books have been written, except for the last one. All my books have been written because people have questioned me, asked me.
Yeah, love it.
Because I'm out there you know, sort of like on stalls, or because I'm a gentle activist, you might say. And that was one of the questions. Well, what on earth do you eat instead? If you don't eat meat, what do you eat? So that's where that book came in, and it's not a whole food book. It's just what you can eat instead of meat. It's almost like it's a transition. And I think what I have noticed recently is that a lot of people are going plant-based for their health, especially after the Game Changers came out. Brilliant doco.
Yeah,
that was, you know, best thing that could have happened. Especially for men. I think it was a really, really good men's documentary.
Totally agree.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are going plant-based for health. Some are, you know, realizing, and I get this. I have one friend, again, didn't believe me because I'd already told her several times. It was like, oh, did you know that that animal agriculture is bad for the environment? No. I mean, it was like, yeah, so she decided, sorry, I just got to dismiss something there. So she decided that, she was going to cut back on meat. Well, great, you know, that's really cool. But people will go plant-based or vegan or whatever for one reason. It might be health, it might be the animals, it might be the environment. And by doing so, once they become, and your ladies in your group, I think, will be the same. Once they get familiar with the plant-based eating for their health, and their health is important, etc., they then will it opens your heart up to exploring what else does this do, and realizing that it is amazing for the environment, it is wonderful for the animals, and yeah, so there's a do one, so you get all three.
Yeah, so true, so true. And I think that's a really, really important point too about what to eat. I now don't do any cooking with obviously with meat, I say to people, because you already know how to cook with meat, I want to teach you how to cook with legumes. And because that's what I get often, people say, well, I don't know how to use them. I don't know. I don't even know where to start with them. So that's where I start. Usually with simply making hummus.
Yes.
As simple as that. Or I say, if you're making a bolognese, add a can of green lentils. If you're making a chicken casserole, add a can of chickpeas. Just slowly start introducing them, into. Now, I've taken up so much of your time, so I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to ask you one more question. What is your favourite comfort food? Did you have a comfort food that wasn't healthy and you've now made it healthy? Because I just think in the whole journey, it's really important for people to find a healthy version of their comfort food. And I know for me, chocolate, and I just go on and on about these amazing chocolate vegan brownies, because they use a can of black beans in them. They use dates, as the sweetener, and they use a bit of almond paste and a bit of almond flour. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, if I can get people to love these, they're eating beans.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And they don't realise it.
Don't even know it.
They're getting a good protein. They're getting all sorts of things. And black beans. One thing I will say is that when they're looking at the colour of a food, generally goes with something. So, like beetroot is good for anything to do with the blood. That's why it's good for lowering the blood pressure, etc.
Yep.
So, beans are really good for kidneys. It's the colour and the shapes and
love all that.
We have been, nature has just been so kind to us, and they actually, it's almost like they draw us a picture.
Yes.
Right. And the more colourful something is, so the deeper the colour, the better it is for you. So, if you've got a choice of cauliflower or broccoli, always go for the broccoli. Nothing wrong with the cauliflower, but always go for the darker colour. Sweet potatoes rather than potatoes.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with potatoes, but have the sweet potato instead.
Unless it's commercially grown.
Oh, exactly.
And then it's the most heavily sprayed.
I know they are, aren't they?
Planet. Yes.
I know.
Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you again.
That's all right. Go to farmers markets.
Yes.
There is so a comfort food for me. I really, it's too long ago, and I really can't remember, to be perfectly honest. I do know I loved ice cream. So and that's ice cream on a, it's more of a stick, right? And so when Magnums came out with their vegan Magnum, the almond one, I was in there like Flynn, and they've absolutely nailed it. It's brilliant. But it's been so many years since I've had it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it tastes the same. Other people have said it has, but I like it. That's the almond one. So that, and once every so often I will treat myself to that. But hummus is probably my go-to. It's easy to make. It's always there in the fridge. But at the moment we're in summer, watermelon is a real favourite of mine. So I always have a big slice of watermelon. It's already kind of cut, and then I just go in and I'll pick bits off it, and that's my snacking. But that's. I mean, making my own ice cream now with the frozen bananas and fruits. Yeah, that's really cool. And sometimes I'll fatten it up with a bit of coconut, whipped coconut. So coconut cream or something. But I don't have it very often. Again, it's like just whenever. That's really it. So my naughty is well, I don't think it's naughty. As I said, I'm lucky. I can do that. I'm not. I'm not. I haven't been ill. I haven't had a disease or anything like that. So I'm fortunate. I've got it early. I started this journey early. and I'm now 67. So I'm, you know, and I'm rocking it. I'm loving life.
Yeah, yeah. You're amazing, Fee. Thank you so much for coming on today. Now, where can people find you?
I have a brand new website that I have just launched in the last couple of weeks. It is called Gold Card Vegan. It is a totally resource website. It's pretty big. So there's everything there, from all the documentaries you might want to watch. There is books, there is
brilliant.
all the communities like meetups and Facebook groups, and teaching you how to sort of find places. There is also, along with that, is going to be a club, and the club doors are not open yet, but there is, you know, to be a member of the club, there is really good deal on right now at the moment if you want to sign up for it. And in that will be things like there will be a Facebook group which will have live things if we can get the technology right. You know, there's a copy of any one of my books, a signed copy of my book. There's all sorts of benefits if you belong to a group. The ultimate will be a card that hopefully they can take to retailers and get discounts at, you know, eateries. But that's something that will grow over time. I'm not expecting that side of it to be even anywhere near. I mean, I'm sort of thinking 12 months down the track we might have a few retailers in there. But yeah, it's an ongoing labor of love as far as I'm concerned. But there's recipes on there. I mean, there's so much information on there. It was really trying to get one place where people can get all sorts of information.
Yeah. Oh,
rather than scour around the neighbourhood.
Sounds absolutely amazing. I'll be directing my clients there, because I think that's, you know, that's great to have it all in one spot.
Thank you.
It's just fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you soon.